It is the Anfield Wrap, it is the Trends. I am Neil Atkinson. This is Josh Williams. The Trends is a show that we used to do in the past. We're going to bring it back this year in conjunction with Josh, mostly. I mean, he doesn't have to do every single one. That'd be ridiculous. I've not got a gun to his head. But we're going to be using stats to talk about football, talk about Liverpool first and foremost, but talk about football. What I'm conscious of is that, and what I'm conscious of in the round recently, is the idea that ultimately what a statistical-based conversation shouldn't do is close the door on anyone. But I think that at times terms are used and how things are being reached is just now sort of taken as read in a number of places. For instance, we're going to talk about expected goals and shots in the first couple of these, and now expected goals comes up at the end of match of the day, but some people don't understand what it means. I think that's perfectly reasonable. People don't have to understand everything, Josh. So what I want to do is almost build this conversation from scratch, and this really is from scratch. It is explaining a lot of the terms that get used, and we're going to do it across a number of episodes, and those episodes that are explained, we're going to put them up for free so everyone can see and go from there, and then when we come to the season we'll go behind the paywall. But it's really important to say the eye test remains important, i.e. watching the games does not in any way, shape or form become superseded by what the numbers say. It's instead the idea, and everyone who's really good in the analytics industry is really, really good at understanding either why the stats should take you to watch the game to understand what happened, or why watching the game should take you to the stats to back up what it is you think. It isn't as though one replaces the other.
No, the bottom line is it's all evidence, really. It's all evidence surrounding the game or a player or a team or whatever. And I think rather than just picking a team, picking a side, I am a numbers guy, I am a tactic guy, I am an eye test guy or whatever, just group it all together if you can and form your opinions based on that. And I must admit, I used to be, there was a point where I was a bit of a sceptic when it comes to numbers and that. I think we've all had those periods, but once you kind of get into the industry and you start doing your own work a little bit more, you do realise the value that they can provide. But I can understand as well why like people might get intimidated by them. Because there is kind of a lot of new stuff. Expected goals is a very modern thing. People who've been watching the sport for like 50 years will not see a need to pay attention to it. I understand why, but if you do, it can just kind of, I don't know, it can almost teach you stuff. I've learned a lot from it.
Well, I think that's the key part of this really is, first and foremost, there's nothing for anyone to be scared of. Anyone can get on board with this. You know, there's occasional bits of adding up, but beyond that, it is not some sort of in-depth algebra or anything like that. But also, I think that when you do begin to sort of grasp it, and we are going to do expected goals first because I think it's important to almost have that in your mindset with the whole history of how analytics has grown, and we'll get onto that in a second. But also, if you're explaining it well and you're using it well, a lot of the time it can be almost a bit like, well, yeah. Afterwards, that to me is when everything's working in harmony. When you watch the game, you come away, you think, I thought I noticed that. You look it up, it's like, yeah, that was. And I think that to the evidence points, you know, it's great at times to have your thoughts, well, not at times, full stop. It's good to have your opinions questioned and there's be reasons to do that. So you have to think about things again or reassess. But yeah, a lot of the time, you know, I always remember there was a game I watched away at Leicester, going back, it was one of Alisson's first games. Alisson makes a mistake. So if you remember it in 2018, it goes 2-1. And and he moves Wijnaldum left mid. And Wijnaldum didn't do much, but he kept him on, he kept him left mid. And what Wijnaldum was doing was blocking the passing lanes. He was just killing it. And then I was just sort of had that in my head. And I looked it up afterwards on all the stats bombs, great stuff. And he'd done nothing, Wijnaldum. So you can either do one or two things here. You can either go, well, he's done nothing, therefore he's not performed. Or because there isn't a measurable act, all of his acts were immeasurable and he was just stopping them from playing down that side, and that the manager made that change and that was the outcome. And I always remember sort of thinking, well, that's great, because I thought I saw that he wasn't doing much, then I checked it and he wasn't doing much, but we've got to allow for the idea that one, Liverpool won the game, and two, Leicester didn't create anything down that side, so he's been doing something. And I think that's what this stuff can be really useful for.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's been points in previous years where people have pointed out, you can't quantify this, you can't quantify that. That's always true, it's always going to be true with certain things, but we are getting gradually, year on year, better at quantifying pretty much everything in football. Like even, for example, expected goals only focuses on shots. So naturally a lot of criticism is, well, there was a point where we got a really good chance, but the fella doesn't take a shot because he misses the ball by a yard or something. But there's things nowadays that can quantify that as well, like expected threat and things like that. So we are getting to a point where we can put a number on most things in football.
One of the things that this pulls us into, and why expected goals matters as the first point of a lot of this, is first and foremost, Josh, the purpose of football is to score more goals than your opponent. That's it. Yeah. You score goals by having shots. but we'll put own goals to one side. You score goals by having shots, but not all shots are equal. And anyone who's watched the game for any length of time can see that. But also having a value on what a shot is or isn't potentially worth allows you to do, when you talk about expected threat, in both sides, attacking or defending, it allows you to measure the rest. So that's why expected goals it's almost the start point, isn't it, in amongst all of this. It's the first thing you need to nail, the first thing that you need to understand, the first thing that the analytics industry had to work out how to do, was because that therefore ends up attributing a value to everything else.
Yeah, well, one thing I love about the data, and I say this fairly often, is it allows you to remove all of the noise, all of the nonsense, and focus on what matters, right? And within the context of a football match, there might be players who are doing good stuff in the middle of the park, you know, all kinds of like nice tackles, some hard men in there or whatever. The bottom line is the only thing that really truly matters in the game of football is the shots that you take at one end and the shots that you face at the other end. And that's what expected goals focuses on. It puts a number on what you've created and it puts a number on what the opposition have created. Some of them might go in, some of them might not. Finishing can be weird like that. But the reason I focus on XG more than any other metric is just because it puts a number, it allows me to gain a kind of grasp on like the stuff that matters here when it comes to winning games. Have Liverpool been better than Fulham, you know, or something like that. And some people look at the scoreline, that's fine. But I think if you look at the XG, generally, you'll get more of a taste of what might come in the next 10 games or something like that. In a one-off game, anything can happen when it comes to finishing. But XG can offer an insight into like trends and stuff like that are upcoming.
It's worth saying, isn't it, that it doesn't always necessarily tell the story of any given game. We're going to come on to that in a minute, but you know, games have game states. Yeah. People get sent down to 10 men. The trend, and that's why the show's called The Trends. The trends are actually the most important thing. There isn't a, you know, the longer you get more data for, the more likely it is you're going to be able to interpret it in a way that's useful because you've got more information first and foremost and to go from there. And again, what people shouldn't be is, you know, there is such a thing as side X, and we'll talk about a couple of examples of it, but side X got 2-0 up early and they just went, right, that's us, we go from there. And so that it is worth saying, isn't it, that it isn't, again, some sort of be-all and end-all as an answer. Game state will play a massive part, and we're going to keep saying the phrase game state as we do all of these shows. I think game state is something that dictates how other numbers therefore apply. Yeah,
well, there's always context behind it, isn't there? Yeah. There's always kind of like, you know, it's very easy to just look at the numbers, and as in the headline numbers, and then walk away. But in reality, most of the time you have to delve a little bit deeper, and race maps and things like that, which we're going to touch on, can offer an insight into game states and things. So.
Yep, so it's worth just saying this. Let's just say this and acknowledge this. And if you're listening to this, I'd love you to try to argue with it, because I think it is true. The more good shots a team creates, the better the side. The more good shots a team stops, the better the side. Yeah. The more good shots a team concedes, the worse the side, and the fewer good shots a team creates, the worse the side. This is ultimately all of football is about finding a way to get the round thing into the rectangular thing. There is nothing else in there. It's how you do that. There's no perfect way to do it, but most of the time, the better the opportunities, the better the side.
Exactly. It is literally as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Just create good shots, stop the opposition from doing that. That's football.
So we're going to do a couple of race charts for you first, quite quickly. The reason why is we're going to do race charts more in a second episode and how they're used and all of that. But I want to use these because it touches on the game state point that we've just made there for both of us. The first one, and they're both Liverpool wins, by the way, is Liverpool versus Spurs in 2019. Liverpool versus Spurs in 2019, Liverpool end up, according to the race chart, creating 2.4 expected goals. Spurs 1.38. Liverpool win 2-1. But the first thing to point out is that Liverpool only, in inverted commas, create 2.4 expected goals. That's actually a really good return for most games. But it's worth saying, Liverpool just stop having a shot after the 80th minute. They've got themselves to 2-1 up against the Tottenham side they'd beaten in the European Cup final last time out, and they batten down the hatches. There's then a better example, which is the next one along the line here, which is the game against Manchester City in the 2019 season, which is the next home game after that Tottenham one. And Liverpool at this point were in such a frame of mind, and Liverpool 2019 are a really funny side in terms of what they didn't do around expected goals. Liverpool go 3-0 up. They have their last shot before the 70th minute. Manchester City get a late-ish consolation. City's expected goals ends up being 1.42. Liverpool's is 0.98. But this is when we say game state, this is what we mean, isn't it? That whilst there are things that are happening in football matches all the time. One of the main things that's happening is what the scoreboard is doing to what the footballers themselves, how they're going to react. So City score a goal, create a decent late chance, end up with a stronger expected goals than Liverpool, but everyone feels as though Liverpool looked after that game really, really well. Tottenham, Liverpool go 1-0 down, turn it round, get ahead, feel as though they can keep Tottenham at arm's length. The footballers are responding to what's happening, aren't they?
Well, I think we've just saw a lot of that at the Euros, you know, especially with England, you know, taking a lead or going a goal behind and then suddenly they start attacking, or they get a lead and then they sit back on the Southgate or whatever. Liverpool, I think, traditionally under Klopp have tried to be the same in every game state, and I think City tried to be the same in every game state, but naturally, if you know you have a lead, you might sit on a little bit more, and that's why Liverpool's race map here, you know, ends on the 70th minute, because they just kind of stop attacking because they've got enough goals to win the game. So you can kind of batten up the hatches almost for the rest of the 20 minutes and just get 3 points easy.
In individual games, G is the defining factor, because G dictates so much, and it's worth always remembering that it is central. But the way in which that then influences other stuff is obviously in there. The key part of this, though, is that you can't do analytics without the expected goals to the final aim. So it is central to most of the metrics, because shots are central to the entire purpose of football. What Liverpool are doing when they shut the game down at 3-0 against Manchester City is they're not stopping playing football. They just want to create a game state where it's really hard for Manchester City to have shots. That's the aim. They do the same thing in that previous one against Tottenham in these two examples, i.e. that idea of where shots are and quality shots are in the football match becomes a movable feast. That's a really important point. So again, it's important not to sort of lose yourself in, well, this doesn't mean this or doesn't mean this. Effectively, all of football is about shots. It's about attempts on goal, quality attempts on goal, weaker attempts on goal. That's what the whole thing's about, and that's the most important thing. When we go through stuff at the Anfield Wrap, we use StatsBomb. They're brilliant people, and they took, a few years back, they took their expected goals model onto another level. They started to add key information as goalkeeper position in there as well, and the position of all attackers and defenders, and this is really, really important. They also use shot impact height, i.e. literally where the ball is in terms of where it is on the pitch, with reference to the grass being the bottom and then moving up from there. That's important. For me, position of defenders, Josh, is really important in order to get the best out of the metrics. So I've got two examples back to back here. The first one, which you can see if you're watching this as a video, if you're listening to it, a little bit tougher, but the first one is Nunez's goal against Brentford. You should be able to remember it from the edge of the area. He's one-on-one with Flecken, dinks him, gorgeous stuff, flamboyant finish. The next one along, is Gakpo against West Ham. You might not remember this. Gakpo picks the ball up. It's almost exactly on the field, the same position as Nunez, the same position as Nunez, and he has a shot, but the difference is that there's a Liverpool player in front of him and 3 West Ham players in a triangle around him at that point. So, and again, this is just common sense. The XG on the Nunez effort is 0.44, the XG on the Gakpo effort is 0.05, 0.44, 44 times out of 100, the whoever it is having the shot is expected to score. 0.05, 5 times out of 100, that ball somehow finds itself into the back of the net, is what the data shows. This is one of the reasons why I think StatsBomb at times comes in cumulatively lower than other models, is because they're very much on top of where the ball is on the pitch. But this is a really important thing, isn't it, Josh? The positioning of the other defenders, the other players on the pitch, full stop, when we're talking about expected goals, is critical, not just literally where the football is and where the person having the shot is.
Yeah, the position of the goalkeeper as well.
Yeah.
It's probably quite a big one. But this is why generally, if you're looking at expected goals on Twitter or whatever, you'll see different numbers from different accounts and things like that.
Yep.
It's because every model is slightly different in how sophisticated it is. StatsBomb generally have the best. Liverpool use StatsBomb, for example. And that's because it's the most sophisticated in that there's so many elements in the model, such as the position of the goalkeeper, the position of defenders, the velocity of the shot, I think, is in there as well.
They're trying to get to that, especially with post-shot XG.
Yeah. So all of that just kind of adds to this, you know, how sophisticated is your expected goals model. StatsBombs is the best, but sometimes you'll get one that's a bit less sophisticated, so you'll get, you know, variance on the numbers and that. But generally, you'll see similar-ish numbers for the most part, at least.
You will indeed, but it is, again, it's worth just pointing this out. So between the two slides, I've look at them again. You've got the Nunez one, no one in front of him, no one around him. You can see literally who's where. You've even got Jota to his left there, and then you've got this Gakpo one where he is crowded out. It is just not a high-value shot, the one that Gakpo attempts. We know he's good from 18 yards out. There's tons of evidence of it, but there's being good from 18 yards out, and then there's having a situation that Edison Alvarez is right in front of you. It just makes it so much harder and so much likely to get to a result in there as well. The other thing to point out as well is that block shots never get included, both in old style statistical models, but now also moving forward on post-shot XG as shots on target, Josh. I think this sometimes bemuses people a little bit, and I think at times it skews bits and pieces of conversation. So I've got a Nunez attempt from not last season gone, but the season before, when David Raya is nowhere to be seen. He was still playing for Brentford, but Ben Mee gets across to clear it off the line. And then when someone assesses that game after the match, one, that's not down as a shot on target, and two, even though it was going to go in if Ben Mee wasn't there, it's an extreme example, but when a defender blocks anything, it does not count as having had post-shot XG or anything like that. And the reason why is because post-shot XG is in part for goalkeepers, but also that is just the nature of saying, no, the defender blocked it.
Yeah, well, this is generally why, I think probably another reason why people are generally a little bit sceptical, because the definitions can sometimes play with people in terms of what they expect from a certain metric, yeah. But a shot on target basically either goes in or has to be saved by the goalkeeper, basically. I mean, when I was going up, for example, I would have thought a shot on target would include hitting the post.
Same.
It doesn't, so things like that are quite interesting, but once you kind of work out, the intricacies of all that sort of stuff, you get to grips with it. Yeah,
so some players and teams are noisier than others. We'll move forward and we'll talk about what's a close shot, what's a good shot. Let's do this in a really basic way. Central and close. Good?
Yeah.
There we are. Crosses are harder than you think. I think this is a point which, in our fast football watching minds, if something flashes across goal, we always feel as though someone should perhaps do a little bit better before we get to the next phase of this as well, which is that feet are just more useful than heads. It's as simple as that. You're better off with your feet than you are with your head. But crosses are harder than you think to get them into the back of the net.
Yeah, well, there's a chapter in my book actually dedicated to Liverpool a few years ago under, I think it was Kenny Dalglish at the time.
Yep.
And we did use data to build the squad, but we built it towards a playing style that was suboptimal. In that, lots of crossing, Stuart Down on set pieces with Henderson and Charlie Adam and all that. Andy Carroll up front getting on the end of these.
Cout back post.
Yeah, but we just didn't score many goals, and it didn't work very well. So that was using data, but using it badly, because the playing style was not, as I said, it was all headers, it was all crosses, and they've been understood by the analytics community as, suboptimal is the word that comes to mind.
That's 12 years ago now. 12 years is a massive amount of time, and also I remember going to those matches and feeling a bit like, well, we're creating a lot. Yeah. And we're just not sticking it in the back of the net. It's frustrating, but to your point, they were suboptimal. So we'll start off on the headers point. So there's two headers from last season I've got here back to back for you from similar spots on the pitch. The first one's Jota, and it's a goal against Burnley. Now, look, the goalkeeper's nowhere, not in his goal. He's come forward. He's the bluish rectangle you can see in there. You should remember the goal. There's one man on the line. Jota heads it. At the point at which he heads it, he's relatively untroubled by opposing defenders. There's no one closing him down. Its expected goals is still only 0.32, and he is 5.5 yards out when he heads it into the back of the net. That's the nature of that one. The next one I want to show you is same area of the pitch, Virgil van Dijk, but he's crowded by a couple of defenders. Goalkeeper is still on the line. XG on this one is 0.18. So a header unmarked from a corner. They're both from corners. 5 yards, 6 yards from goal for Jota. It's still, the models would say, it's still only a 1 in 3 chance that he sticks it in the back of the net.
Yeah, which is interesting, and clashes with what a lot of people would think. And one thing, generally looking at XG, if you're looking at individual shots and things like that, usually the shot is worth less than you actually think. Like most of the time when you hear like a commentator or something say, oh, he's got to score, he should be scoring that. Most of the time you'll find that he probably wouldn't score it in a normal day, and maybe there's a bit of luck in there or something like that, but even shots that you'd value as like, that's a sitter, are probably scored less than half the time, which is always funny. Like,
we're going to come on to them. We will come on to them as we go through this. Next one along, then, having done those ones, that's Jota, that's Van Dijk. The next two, therefore, these are from crosses. So the two Gakpo efforts, similar distance, from using his feet. One scored, one not with his crosses. Ironically, he misses the one that's a little bit easier. So he scores this one against Martin Dubravka, Newcastle. You remember the game on New Year's Day. 0.39 expected goals. No one around him. 6-yard box, edge thereof. Goalkeeper in front of him, positions on his line. Still only 0.39 because the ball's come in with a bit of pace on it and he's had to divert it into the back of the net from there. So this is from a cross. And the next one is more valuable. It was against Luton at Anfield. 0.46 expected goals. So on the verge of being likely to score than not score, Josh. More players around though, but it was an easier opportunity deemed by the numbers. More players around him. He puts it wide. But the point is that even in these instances, we're still not at the point of should have scored. Even in these instances with these crosses, because the nature of crosses, we're still not at he should have scored.
Yeah, it's generally difficult to put the ball in the net. Unless you haven't realised. I mean, Nunes has probably evidenced that this season, last season, but
he's coming.
He's coming, yeah, he's on his way.
Well, that's that one then. We'll move ourselves on to the next one. These are two misses from a very similar area next season. They're both down as coming from through balls, and shots that come from through balls tend to be the most valuable. That's fair, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of them's generous as a through ball because I don't think Mo Salah meant it, but that's the way in which it was marked up. The two misses, so you'll remember them, both of them. One's Gravenberch against Brighton, and this we see is 0.52. 4 yards out, inside the 6-yard box on a slight angle, 0.52. He misses the target from the, I think the crossbar from it. And the other one is Darwin Núñez against Luton. Very similar position. This is 0.61 because of this is the slight difference because of the height of the ball, and maybe a little bit about where the goalkeeper was as well. Kaminsky's more in his goal for this one, although that should work the other way around, so maybe I'm wrong. It must just be the height of the ball. Núñez, the way it comes to him, they both missed the target, Josh. Both of them they're both high value chances. Neither of them are 0.9 XG, and in our heads they probably registered as 0.9. Certainly in my head, in real time they did. You've absolutely got to score that. But it is fair to say that they're both chances that should be scored with the feet. Yeah,
definitely. You know, some even the most clear-cut chances, there's still 0.9, mate. You know, when you're thinking of 0.9, what are you looking at there? You're looking at full-on tap-ins, really, aren't you? Like
no keeper.
No keeper inside the 6-yard box and stuff. And they're scored 90% of the time or something like that. But most like 1v1s and that, there's still only like a 6 out of 10 chance that that's putting the ball in the net. So it is interesting how it works. It can play with your mind. And if you challenge your own thinking with it, it does impact your perception on the game.
It does indeed. The 2019 one was good for sort of challenging thinking and going in the opposite direction. I just sort of, again, this is back to the idea that not all the answers. We started off with them. I remember, the idea that Liverpool could just stop all activity. And I remember I was speaking to James York at Stats Bomb around the time, and he was saying that a lot of people are saying you just can't keep winning 2-1. With the way these numbers are going, and one of the things he remembers he was thinking was, yeah, everyone just keeps acting, therefore that means that Liverpool will stop winning. And he says at the time he was thinking to himself, no, what's going to happen is Liverpool are going to start winning by bigger margins, and that's how it did transpire with that side. The opposite can happen, but the key thing is this, isn't it? It's the importance of high volume of quality shots created and a low volume of quality shots conceded over the course of a season.
Yeah, that's literally the crux of it. And if you create a lot of high quality shots, generally the goals should follow. And opposite end, if you're restricting that, you shouldn't face many goals, you shouldn't concede many goals and stuff like that. So over the course of a season, that's what will level out. But over individual games, it can be a little bit ugly.
It can indeed. The key thing therefore is understanding the game state is a thing, understanding the choices. It's just a numerical version of being able to say we could have scored 5 today and they were lucky to get one. If you walk away from a game saying that, then the numbers will pretty much tend to bear you out up to a point, as long as you remember that point blank headers are not likely to go in. As long as you remember that one, I think everything else, it would sort of bear you out and you go from there. That's the first one of these. Do share it with anyone. We focused on Liverpool-based numbers. We didn't have to do that, but obviously we're a Liverpool-based podcast. I think it's applicable across the board. We talked about missing as well. I'll point that out. Talked about Liverpool missing, not just Liverpool scoring, as you go all the way through. But do share it. I think that's a strong explainer of the very, very basics of it. Next episode, we're going to talk about post-shot expected goals, the situational use of expected goals. We'll be doing race maps. We'll be doing trend lines. All of that will be explained next time out.